Hello guys, today I will tell you about Henry Ford. I will introduce about his history. Enjoy Vide ASMR. Henry Ford was an American industrialist and business magnate who played a pivotal role in the development of the automotive. He was born on July 30th, 1863 in Greenfield Township, Michigan, and grew up on a farm. Ford had a keen interest in mechanics and engineering from a young age. In 1903, Henry Ford founded the Ford Motor Company, which would go on to become an influential. He introduced the Model T in 1908, which revolutionized the automobile industry by making cars affordable for the average person. The Model T became immensely popular and helped establish Ford. As a leading figure in the industry, Ford's innovative ideas and business strategies also had a profound impact on manufacturing processes. He implemented the assembly line production method, which allowed for mass production of automobiles at a much faster rate. This not only increased efficiency, but of production, making cars more affordable for the general public. Furthermore, Ford was known for his efforts to improve the working conditions and wages of his employees. He introduced the concept of a 40-hour work week and a minimum wage, which was significantly higher than what most workers are. Ford believed that by paying his workers well, they'd be able to afford the products. They creating a Henry Ford's influence extended beyond the automotive industry. He was a prominent advocate of rural and agricultural development and believed in the importance of self-sufficiency. Ford also had a strong interest in social issues and was involved in various initiatives, including the establishment of the Ford Found. Henry Ford passed away on April 7, 1947, leaving behind a lasting legacy in the world of automobiles and manufacturing. His innovative ideas, business strategies, and commitment to social welfare continue to inspire generations of entrepreneurs and engineers. FFF, November 2023 at 03:28. Who is Henry Ford and how he managed to build a car empire on July 30th? It turned 160 years since the birth of Henry Ford, a man who became not only a symbol of motorization, but also with its help changed the world. I remember why it all started. Henry Ford, 1863-1947, is an outstanding American entrepreneur, the initiator of the mass automotive industry, which contributed to the development of this industry, and in the USSR, the creator of still existing transnational. At the same time, Henry Ford was a man of very contradictory, including absolutely non-political, according to the standards of our time, socio-political views. The brief biography of Henry Ford. Henry Ford, which appeared on July 30th, 1863, was the firstborn in a large family of an immigrant farmer, which held the farm near the city of Detroit, Michigan, USA. William Ford, the father of the future entrepreneur, belonged to the genus, which the 16th century moved from England to Ireland, and the mother, Mary, were Belgian roots. Henry, who has not been far incurred by farmers' labor, has a difficult relationship with the father, who wanted to convey his own business to the eldest son. But it was William Ford that's not wanting, hesitated Henry to mechanics, giving that pocket watch, which the teenager immediately began to disassemble and collect again. Curiosity went hand in hand with what they would now be called a business approach, and Henry opened the seeming workshop for repairing ours. Get sick, with more complex mechanisms at the age of 13, forced a meeting on the road with the Nichols and Shepard Peromobile. In the same 1876, Henry's mother died. Became famous, he will write, "I never experienced a special thrust for farming, but my mother I loved on the farm."
After a sad event, departure from the house has become only a matter of time. It came when Henry turned 15. Then the young man went to Detroit to go through the production practice at several plants and returned to the father's farm. The reason was the desire to marry Clara Bryant, whose parents, also farmers, would not give consent to marriage with a man without
William
a penny.
Ford wrapped the prodigal oldest son for returning a plot of 40 acres. The transaction seemed to Henry standing. In 1888, he married Claire, which he impressed not only his ability to dance perfectly, but also a negative attitude towards alcohol, which was a rarity in the American outback, and of course as watch wizard. It was a marriage for life, which contributed to the ability of Clara to be interested in the doors of her husband without interfering with them. Henry appreciated it, and once the question of journalists whether he wants to live another life answered like this: only if you can marry Clara. In the farm, Henry was mainly designing various mechanisms, including a steam tractor. But at the same time, he was looking for an alternative to a bulky and severe steam. The option with an electrotherapy was considered, but the laying of the suspended lines of the currents was too expensive, and there were no enough easy batteries with suitable characteristics at that time. As a result, Henry opted his choice on a gasoline motor. It is for them that he will equip the threshing grain throat, a patent for which Thomas Edison will sell a patent, and that in 1891 will invite him to his company, which has been engaged in the design of the city lighting system in Detroit. Already in 1893, Henry will become its chief engineer, without having higher education. High-paying position allowed us to continue developing a self-moving crew with an internal combustion engine, the result of which was the appearance of Ford Quadricycle in 1896, which will be described in more detail below. At some stage, Ford had to choose between official duties and hobbies, but the choice in favor of the latter was made thanks to the moral support for the wife and finances of William Murphy, Detroit magnate. SC thus, on August 5, 1899, Detroit Automobile Company was formed, a pilot automotive plant in the future city of Motor, whose managers became Henry Ford. But the first pancake came out, obtaining only 20 cars that did not differ in quality at a sufficiently high price. The company went bankrupt in January 1901. However, this failure gave Ford not only the experience of managing production, but also presented an extremely valuable for a person who could not know, and then not learned, to read the drawings with a professional engineer, Harold Wills. The result of the cooperation of this duet was the emergence of a successful model which attracted the attention of the sponsors, and the creation of November 30th, 1901 Henry Ford Company, where Henry took the post of chief engineer, and the side effect was the appearance of Cadillac. After inviting by investors, a vulnerable Ford burst as a consultant of engineer, who was called his name, after which it was called Cadillac Automobile Company, a serious blow to pride. But Henry professed the principle: honest failure is not degrading, the fear of failure is humiliated. And after the peripecias with the search for new sponsors in parallel with the design of a successful racing car, No. 999 became a co-founder formed 16 thus. The chairman of the board of directors is the great-grandfather, William Clay Bill Ford Jr. The last years of Henry Ford's life was overshadowed by death from cancer of the only son, Edsel, the president of the company in 1919 to 1943, a series of strokes, and the pre-bank of Ford Motor in 1945, which had caused the anger of the car king. But the situation did not leave him a choice. As for the socio-political views of Henry Ford, they look incredibly contradictory, but at the same time they are always pronounced. At the beginning of World War II, Henry Ford became part of the pacifists group, which arrived in Europe on the Oscar II ship to convince the warring parties to stop the conflict. This initiative, to put it mildly, did not find an understanding, and after the U.S. joining the war in the spring of 1917, Henry Ford was included in the fulfillment of military orders, promising to return the state all the profits received from them. Whether it actually happened, the story is silent, but the PR propaganda of the Industrialist received a wide public resonance. Henry Ford, long before Stalin, realized that the frames decide everything, but not dragon methods used to combat teaching specialists, but the stimulation system. In 1914, the rates of most employees of the company were enlarged more than doubled. An abbreviated working week was introduced, first 48-hour, and then 40-hour, 5 days to 8 hours. In addition, the company earned more than half a year received the right to participate in the profit, which allowed, for example, to acquire cars produced by the company. Such privileges were deprived of alcohol, non-payment of alcohol, non-payment of alcohol, and other non-per associated deeds, which up to 1922 followed the special public department of the company. Henry Ford was an enemy of creating trade unions, whose activities, as he believed, caused damage to the company's profitability. Only under strong pressure, Ford changed its position in 1941. Henry Ford, already in early 1920s, began to cooperate with the USSR, where they first organized the localized production of Ford tractors, and then cargo and trucks on a specially built in the beginning of the 1930s. At the same time, Henry Ford sympathized with Nazi movement in Germany, and for its anti-Semitic views, the only of the Americans. A laudatory mention in the book of Mein Kampf in Russia was attributed to Ekström. The portrait of Ford hung over the work desk of the Führer, and on the occasion of the 75th anniversary of the entrepreneur, awarded the highest award of the Third Reich for foreigners, the Order for Merit to the German Eagle, which was grateful to accept it. After the start of the Second World, Ford plants in the part of Europe occupied by Germany produced products for the Wehrmacht. Before the U.S. joining the war in December 1941, Ford was a prominent figure in the ranks of the isolationists, arguing that the conflict is the result of a conspiracy, greedy financiers coming by disastering people. However, the Ford plants are actively involved in the production of various technology and arms for the U.S. Army and their allies on the anti-Hitler coalition. Henry Ford from the end of the 19th century. He was a member of the Masonic organizations, and in 1940 at the ceremony of the construction ceremony, 33rd the degree of Scottish Rite, becoming a great holding general inspector, he stated, "Freemasonry is the best equilibrant wheels, the first machine." Henry Ford. The result of the 2 years of experiments was the appearance of the first car Henry Ford in 1896, quadricycle. This name machine received because was omalized by 4 bicycle wheels, which were driven by chain. 2-cylinder gasoline motor transmitted power to 4 GP on a 2-stage box, which did not have the reverse gear. The maximum speed of the sideless crew was 32 kilometers per h. The original quadricycle today is kept in the Museum of Henry Ford in the suburb of Detroit, Dearborn, where the headquarters of the Ford Motor Concern is located. Achievements of Henry Ford, great Henry Ford, make not only cars produced by his company, destroyed patent monopolism in the automotive industry after the trial of Henry Ford's confrontation with the Association of Manufacturers of Licensed Cars, ALAM, which the total amount of materials was 14,000 pages. In 1911, winning the process after a filed appeal to the initial court decision in favor of Selden. Henry Ford said, "You can say with complete confidence that George Selden never did something specific for the development of automotive industries." This victory led to the collapse of the Allen Monopoly Association, and Henry Ford earned a fighter reputation for the interests of consumers. The first implemented the concept of mass car. Henry Ford broke the system in which the car was a toy of the highest sections of society, making it accessible to the middle class by rationalizing the design and maximizing the efficiency of production. This concept was fully implemented in the production of the Ford T model, designed by the already mentioned Harold Wills. Model T, the first car in the world released by millionic circulations, about 15 million from 1908 to 1927, and the first global model produced by Ford plants not only in the United States, but also in several European countries, as well as in Australia. I am quite sure that it is much more profitable to sell a large number of cars at a reasonably low price than a small amount of overpriced, Henry Ford wrote in the first organized large-scale conveyor production in Spiked Opinion. Henry So, if Model T in 1908 cost $850, then after launching the first conveyor line at the Ford plant Highland Park in 1913 already $550, in 1916 $360, and in 1926, in part, this is also due to 1914, the color range of all Ford models, to the only option produced in the United States. The statement of Henry Ford is widely known. The buyer can choose a car of any color, provided that it is black. It is much less known that such a limitation has a completely rational rationale. After numerous samples, it turned out that for drying the black paint, 2 days were required against about 2 weeks in the case of alternative options. The color variety returned to the gamut of the Ford Motor Company's power only in the second half of the 1920s. Actively studied the possibility of using new technologies in the 1930s in the production of a number of components of Ford models was used by soy-based plastic, and in 1942, Henry Ford patented a car with the body from plastic body fixed on a steel tubular frame. Ford was also interested in the possibility of applying the production of biofuels. In total, the account of Henry Ford 161 U.S. patent for the various inventions protected the development of passenger air transportation in the United States, created in 1925. The company's aviation division was designed by Ford 4T Trimotor, the most successful passenger aircraft in the United States up to the appearance in the mid-1930s D. In 1984, Henry Ford was posthumously included in the National Aviation Hall of Fame for merit to this industry. In the initial period of his career, Henry Ford, for promotional purposes and for the sake of obtaining prizes, participated in auto racing, however, as a pilot only once. In 1901, Ford was released by the winner in the competition with Alexander Winton, the most famous American racing driver of the time, on the Oval Grosse Pointe in Detroit. Until 1911, the hired drivers on Ford models set a number of records and won the transcontinental race, from the ocean to the ocean, 1909. In 1913, Henry Ford tried to declare Model T per 500 miles of Indianapolis, but having received the prescription to lose a car per 1,000 pounds, about 450 kilograms, refused to further participate in competitions with the words, "We later, in his memoirs, Henry Ford was very short and dismissively responded about motor racing, since, in his opinion, victories in competitions can serve as a measure of the value of the car's design only for ignoramus." Nevertheless, in 1996, Henry Ford was included in the American Hall of Motorsport Glory, After half a century and 19 years after enrollment in the National Car Hall of Fame and the U.S. Business Glory Hall, respectively, Ford Motor Company car concern, in 2022, Ford Motor Company, the fourth producer of cars in the volume of release over the entire period of existence, in the Fortune Global 500 list, ranked 53rd among the group. Ford Motor has been controlled by Ford's family for more than a century. At the same time, Ford Motor Company is a public company whose shares are quoted on the New York Stock Exchange. Henry Ford built his empire on two key principles. On the one hand, a huge vertical integrated structure was created to ensure hard control over the cost of products, such as the River Rouge full-cycle plant in Dearborn. On the other hand, Ford created production facilities and outside the United States, believing that international trade and cooperation will contribute to the establishment of last enterprise. Ford Motor became the plant in August 1904 in Canada, and by 1929, the empire Henry Ford had branches on all continents, besides Antarctica. In the early 1930s, almost every third car in the world was produced at Ford factories. After the collapse of the USSR, Ford became the first foreign automotive company that opened production in Russia, 2002. Details in our material on the link. Today, the company is divided into three geographical signs: Ford North America, Ford Asia Pacific, and Ford of Europe. In 2022, 3,438,222 cars of Ford brand were sold in the world. Another 163,747 was implemented by the Lincoln Luxury Division, which was included in the Ford Motor in 1922. Top 10 countries in terms of sales. Ford looks like this: USA, 1837915 PCS. United Kingdom, 234097 PCS. Canada, 233114 PCS. China, 224172 PCS. Germany, 168108 PCS. Italy, 95004 PCS. France, 67559 PCS. Australia, 60463 PCS. Turkey, 56430 PCS. Spain, 41422 PCS. For the first time published in 1922, My Life, My Achievements is not just autobiography, and the work reflecting in the capacious, memorable phrases system of Ford's views on the car business and on life as a whole. Enthusiasts are fighters, enthusiasm, the cornerstone of all progress. Only with him is possible. Without it, you only have opportunities. Thought about the future, constant reflections on how to do more, give rise to such a state of mind in which nothing seems impossible. The ideas are valuable themselves, but every idea in the end is only an idea. The task is to realize it practically. It seems that everyone was looking for the shortest road to money, and at the same time they went around the most direct, the one that leads through labor. The best job is a highly paid hobby. The defeat is just an opportunity to start first, and this time is more reasonable. Failures are obtained as a result of fear, peace, stockiness, and carelessness. Elimination of fear creates confidence and abundance. Stand unarmored, let the weak get alms. Success is 99% failure. When it seems that everything is against you, remember that the plane takes off against the wind. Everything can be done better than it was done so far. Quality is to do something right, even when no one looks at. For some reason, always think primarily about how to reduce the cost of production and not how to simplify the goods itself. And you need to start with it. I chose the next slogan. If someone refuses my car, I know that I am guilty of himself. The main benefit of capital is not to make more money, but in making money for the improvement of life. have money absolutely necessary, but we must not forget that the purpose of the money is not idleness, but the increase in funds for serving people. I believe that there is nothing disgusting idle life. None of us has rights to her. In civilization there is no place to tune Eve. If you prick a firewood yourself, they will warm you twice. There is one rule for the industrialist: to produce the goods of the best quality for as far as possible low price, paying as high salary as possible. Business that makes only money is a bad business. Wealth, like happiness, is never achieved when they seek directly to him. This is a byproduct of the provision of useful services. It's good that the people do not understand how our banking system works. Otherwise, tomorrow would have happened a revolution. 80% of the beauty of the car, in its wheels. The best car is a new car. Anyone who ceases to learn, be 20 or 80. Anyone who continues to learn remains young. The most important thing in life is to keep the brain of the young. Think is the hardest job. That's probably why this is doing so few. Gym classes are complete nonsense. He is not needed healthy, but patients are contraindicated. There are 3 things that become more valuable with age: old firewood for burning fire, old books for reading, and old friends for pleasure. Life, as I understand it, is not a stop but a journey. Everything is in motion, and from the very beginning it was intended to this. Capture the second book, Henry Ford, International Jewry, which is a collection of articles that were published in the car magnate, the Dearborn Independent, in 1920 to 1922. This work, published in Russia in the 1990s, then twice, in 2009 and 2015, it was entered into a federal list of extremist materials whose distribution is prohibited, and according to art, 20.29 Kyoape of Russia shall be punished with a fine of 1,000 to 3,000 rubles, or administrative arrest for up to 15 days. The wide public campaign in the United States, with the condemnation of anti-Semitic statements contained in the articles published by the Dearborn Independent, and the informed claims, made Henry Ford settle the conflict in an extrajudicial manner with the book International Jewry,